Hi, so I'm here with Linda Broocks. She's a filmmaker behind Mother's Day. Welcome to our Brussels Film Festival.
Thank you so much, Steve.
Wonderful to meet you once more.
It's wonderful to see you.
No, and you, and again, many thanks for supporting the festival. It means a heck of a lot to us, of course.
Well, I gotta say, I think it's the best run festival I've ever been involved with. So, I mean, this and London were both just fabulous.
It means a lot to us. I mean, we of course, I need to ask you, I know, I've seen the film, but the synopsis of your documentary.
Well, it features the mothers of five death row inmates, two of whom have already been executed now, and it's really just tells the story of their experiences, the grief they feel, the total inability to believe that their child would be involved in something of this sort. The fact that they feel guilty, they feel blamed, they feel shunned, they feel ostracized, and feel that they have very little understanding among the community, that they should not have a right to grieve, that, why should you grieve? Your son or daughter was a monster. I mean, and of course they grieve. Of course this is a horrible pain for them. The film is not intended in any way to discount the pain that the family
or to try and prove their innocence. It's about
it's just about
to them.
That's right. And I don't mean to discount the pain of the victims and their families. I mean, that's horrific. But that's not what this is about.
No.
It's simply about that there are collateral consequences to the death penalty that most of us don't think about, and that's the family members of the accused who really didn't have anything to do with it, but are punished in a very real way.
And do all these, because I can't remember from seeing the film, do all these executions centre around, I don't know, say Texas or Florida?
No.
That is split across the states.
Three of them are in Texas, one in Mississippi, one in Pennsylvania.
Yeah.
Texas does tend to be a leader in the area of the death penalty. Texas, California, and Florida for a long time were really the leaders, and Texas and Arkansas and Oklahoma may be now. So,
I mean, I know you because you were a lawyer for something like 35, 38 years.
I'm still a lawyer.
You're still a lawyer. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. So you're practicing. So you'd have more understanding of the data in regards to the question I'm going to ask you, and this is nothing to do with the film. It'd be interesting to know if there's a proven case for the death penalty and the effects on crime. So we're trying to say statistically, I guess the question is, has it been proven that it is a deterrent?
No, it really hasn't. Unfortunately, in Texas, there did tend to be there was sort of a lull in executions, and then they began again, and the crime rate did, I believe, coincidentally tend to go down at that time, which gave a lot of food for thought, fodder for the argument that it was a deterrent. But I don't believe that there's any true empirical evidence that the death penalty is a deterrent. I think what it is it's institutionalized revenge, and I guess there's an argument for that, but I think it's just too fraught with the possibility of making a mistake.
Because you can't go back if you've got the wrong
No.
And this is the thing, although I can see why the death penalty in certain cases would be, a lot of people advocate it, but my reticence in all of this, as has happened, we know it's happened, certainly in the UK, I'm sure in the US, they've been proven innocent after they've been executed. Then what happens?
Well, and there sometimes is restitution, but there are countless numbers of people who have been on death row and ultimately proved innocent and are now released. Even if there's just 10 of those, that's too many. But there are those who would argue that if we get a couple of innocent people, too bad. It's worth it to get the guilty ones, and I think that's just the opposite.
Yeah, that's horrific, isn't it? To be honest, it's an awful way of looking at things, Because it was God forbid, my son or daughter. I mean, you can't. It's ridiculous.
No, and that's one of the things that I think people come away with when watching Mother's Day, is that it could happen to you. These mothers seem pretty normal. they did their best as mothers, and they never expected that this was going to happen in their lives, that their child would be convicted of a crime like this.
And of course, and again, this is not taking away any from the gravity of the horrific situation in each case, but often the inmates, well, not often, I think most of the time, the inmates are on death row for a long period of time. So it's not 5 or 6 years, it could quite easily be 20 or 30 years, can't it? You know?
Oh, on death row? Yes,
Death row.
absolutely.
So that whole thing is going on and on and on. I know you've got appeal processes, and actually to have someone executed, quite rightly, should take some time, but even so, it seems to be a horrendous amount of time in terms of going through the process, the legal process.
Yes,
before
absolutely.
And I know that's etched in all the faces of the women parents that you interview, I should say, is that awful pain
Yes.
that they're going through. I know it's 5. Could you have easily had more? I mean, were there other people, other parents that you were considering, or were they always going to be the 5?
Well, there certainly were others that I've talked with, that I've considered. These 5 mothers were they just stood out among those that I interviewed, and they were the most willing to tell their stories. I mean, you know, some people just don't want to talk about it, but these 5 mothers were very eager to tell their stories, and to have, because they had no one who really understood their pain, and they wanted to share it. One of the mothers said, "I love this movie. Can I please be friends? Can I make contact with all the other mothers, because
Because they've got the shared pain.
They've got this shared pain. I would really like to make contact with them."
And did that happen?
I've trying to put them all in touch with each other.
And what about, I know you said 2 of them have since been executed. Has this become an ongoing story of connection with you in terms of those mothers that are shown in the film?
Yes.
Okay.
I am still in contact with them and letting them know the progress of the film and that sort of thing.
And I mean, you can't.
I'm Facebook friends with all of them. We keep up that way too. I'm keeping up with the appeal process on the 3 whose children are still alive, and doing as much as I can to help. Precious little, but offering moral support mostly.
And with all that legal experience you've had over a number of years, even then after making this film, did it affect you in any way in terms of opinions about, not even in terms of the death penalty, although it may have done, but did it make you reevaluate anything that you didn't think you'd reevaluate again?
I don't know the answer to that. I certainly do know that they all impacted me emotionally very deeply. I didn't think, one of the mothers really gave me the impression that she was questioning the guilt or innocence of her son, even though he is protesting his innocence.
Oh, you mean you think she now believes he's actually possibly guilty?
No, I think she has some doubts now.
Oh, okay.
I think he is probably not guilty, but she's just, during the entire trial, she thought there was no way that he had done this. Now she says, well, whatever he's done, he's still my son.
Oh, well, that's interesting. And this isn't kind of film you can go back to in terms of, well, I imagine you can't go back to, because you're not going to want to follow this up with the after effects, which I suppose would be too distressing, although it would be quite interesting to know, post this in a couple of years' time, but it's going to be one of those subject matters that's going to be too difficult to.
That's right. Well, I think actually that the mothers would like, the 3 mothers whose children still are on death row would like to talk about it again. I finally got into, one of the things that I did, the first order of business was to try to contact the attorneys of the children on death row to make sure that I would not do anything that would prejudice their appeals. Because, and I'm saying, this is not about them. This is not about the alleged crime. This is just about the impact on the mothers. But the mothers often testified in the trials.
Of course,
so, and they did in these cases. They testified at the trial, and with varying results. But this did not touch upon much of their testimony, except in the guilt and innocence and the punishment phase. But in speaking with those attorneys, I assured them and got their permission, except in one case. I just could not get the attorney. I finally met him now after he was at a screening of the movie and actually participated in a panel discussion with me. And I was able to get his blessing sort of after the fact. I'd left him several messages. He's somebody who does a lot of these on a pro bono basis. And
so can you explain what pro bono is?
It means pro bono means without being paid.
Right, okay.
So he volunteers, and he's a teacher of trial advocacy, and he has his own law practice.
Right.
But he does a lot of these because he just believes in the case, and so he takes them on. So he
I think you do pro bono work as well. So
I have done a number of pro bono death penalty cases.
Right.
Right now I'm not working on any death penalty cases, but I'm doing other sorts of pro bono work.
Right, okay.
But anyway, I finally got the after the fact approval from him. He says, yeah, and we discussed the film before an audience that was interested in the death penalty and its collateral consequences.
Are you able to explain, because I'm struggling to understand why a conviction of such magnitude, because it's the ultimate penalty,
right,
is not taken by the Supreme Court in terms of, I don't understand why it's not taken at a national level rather than a state level. Why each state can do you see what I mean? It just seems such a bizarre...
the United States Supreme Court does have authority over this ultimately if it decides to take the case. And the Supreme Court has issued all sorts of constitutional mandates, one of which figured very significantly in a death penalty case I tried, which was that people who are mentally retarded, and mentally retarded means an IQ of 70 or below, that they are entitled to special instructions to the jury and special consideration on whether they could really understand what they had done and the magnitude of this crime. Could they, and were they what you call death worthy? So that figured in one of my appeals. That was the way I was able to reverse a death penalty conviction, because those instructions had not been given to my client. And just recently, the United States Supreme Court, I say recently, within the past 5 years, has decided that no one under the age of, who committed a crime under the age of 18 can be convicted, can be sentenced to death.
Right.
And one of the children involved in my film was indeed arrested when he was 17.
Is he still alive?
He's executed.
So this was post, oh God, so this, had the ruling happened whilst he was still on death row, he would have been presumably gone to life in prison. Or maybe had served 30 years, I don't know.
Right.
I guess sort of more about it's of such magnitude, why they don't say at the Supreme level either we have or don't have the death. For instance, in the UK, we would do or don't, and we don't.
Right.
Because it's done at a national level. So I'm
well, the United States Supreme Court has the ability to say that the death penalty is against the 8th Amendment, which is the amendment that says no cruel and unusual punishments.
And why have they not done that? I'm assuming they're not doing it because they allow the state to consider this on a state-by-state basis.
Well, they have, but also they have decided that execution is not necessarily a cruel and unusual punishment, given the circumstances of the crime and the way in which the trial is conducted and the way in which the execution is carried out. They have not made that decision yet. They've made a number of decisions about cruel and unusual punishment, but the death penalty as a whole, no, it's not a cruel and unusual punishment, according to the United States Supreme Court.
It's fascinating stuff. So, in terms of, we'll use Texas as an example, would that have been decided? That's obviously decided at state level. But is that after, would they have consulted for, say, a referendum, or are they just taking it upon themselves to decide one way or the other?
No, the legislature, there could be a Texas constitutional amendment. We amend our constitution all the time. Unlike the United States Constitution, the Texas Constitution gets amended all the time. It's very long, lots of amendments. And we could do that, but there's just not the political will in Texas
there's no
right
movement
now
to do that.
That's right. Interestingly, in 1972, the Supreme Court did decide that the death penalty statutes of Texas, California, Florida, Georgia, Alabama, a lot of states, 7 states, were unconstitutional. And so Texas didn't have a death penalty for a few years.
And then back to
the legislature had to rewrite the statute, and it came back into effect. And that actually, my study of that death penalty actually led to the first germ of the idea for this movie, because I read the transcripts of all these capital murder cases that had taken place under the new death penalty, and that's when I read the testimony of these mothers and became so taken with their stories.
And now you've had a taste of filmmaking, and albeit this is going to affect you. It would affect anyone emotionally. Anyone would try and stay remote from that, but it would be very difficult to do, of course, because you've interviewed these parents. You know what they're going through.
We cried together.
Yeah, exactly.
We sat and cried.
Yeah, of course. So you've been through this, but you've got the taste for filmmaking clearly. Where do you go from here? What's next?
Well, I'm working on a project right now, and we're going to start filming in September.
A lighter subject?
It's about survivors of sex trafficking, not victims, but survivors, those who have overcome, who are gritty and resilient and taking the world by storm. I want them to be seen as whole people rather than the sensationalized images that we usually see in films about sex trafficking. These women are strong, and they've got a whole other aspect to their lives that I want to see focused on.
So a difficult subject, but again, I assume the whole idea is to try and show you can, positive, I don't know if that's the right word about this, but you can come out of these horrific situations and make it through.
Yes.
And when does that start?
Well, the filming, we're going to start next month.
So you've got all the bits in place for the people
I don't have, well, it's an ongoing process. I'm still continuing to talk to young women and persuade them to be part of this project. But I have, and some subject matter experts as well, some women who have been involved on the front lines of fighting sex trafficking will be interviewed as well.
Fantastic. So that's it. Thank you so
much
again.
I really enjoyed it. Thank you so much.
Thank you. It was a delight to talk to you. Thank you.
Wonderful to talk to you.
Moment. Thanks.